Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, an iTutor production. At iTutor, our vision is to ensure every child has access to education, regardless of circumstance. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space, who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayely Spira-Bauer.
So we are back today with the Learning Can't Wait podcast with someone I consider both a colleague, a friend, and honestly, one of the most impactful people I have ever met in my life, Marnee Grant. Welcome, Marnee.
Hey, Hayely. Hey, excited to be here.
When I say colleague, in the literal sense, I mean someone I work with at iTutor.com. Why don't you tell everybody, it's just past your 1 year anniversary, what it is you do with the iTutor team?
Yeah. We just realized that because it's been quite a year that has passed. So I've been here for about a year. The role of director of recruitment for our educators. We've been doing a lot over the last year. So I had the honor and pleasure, privilege, all of that to build out a really, really cool recruitment team and the recruitment strategies and how we get our awesome educators on our platform and in assignments impacting kids all across the nation. And so over the last past year, we've implemented and developed some really cool systems. We grew from a team of 2 to a team of about 6. And just been rocking and rolling for the last past year. We are extremely excited about this next year. Folks have, gotten some wind under their wings, kind of really figuring out like things that are working. And so we're definitely up to the challenge to getting the best and the brightest educators on our platform and teaching kids.
I love that you always shine on your team. It's one of the things that makes you an exceptional leader. I think I'm going to put a pin in the topic of what your team does, which I'm going to name right now.
Yeah.
It's a specific kind of recruiting called high volume recruiting. It is not for the faint of heart, but there's a lot of history that leads to how you and your team have built this kind of mechanism for high volume recruiting that we will get to a little bit later in the episode.
Yep. Excited about that.
Let's look back. Let's go back in time a bit. You have such an interesting history in and around education. You are a recruiter's recruiter. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how recruitment became your path?
So it's kind of one of those things that kind of chose me. I really didn't choose it. So how I led into education, specifically recruiting teachers. Really, there are 2 big influences for me. One, a mentor who happened to be my college roommate's uncle, who was a principal at a high school. And I had the privilege and honor of being a mentor to high school students after I gained my first quote unquote real job after college. My barber, who became my roommate, started talking to us about his uncle, who was his mentor, big brother, someone that he really looked up to. So he would come around to our apartment probably a week, every other week, and just always, he's one of the first people I can remember that always, and I mean literally always, just talked about the joy of teaching, education, why it was important, and was steadily, even before we earned our degrees, was steadily recruiting us to become teachers. At that particular time, did not want to hear about education. I had my eye on the prize of, joining a corporate organization, making a ton of money, and, just kind of that whole path. So fast forward some years later, actually was in a cubicle in a pretty large corporate organization, and got an opportunity to join the organization's mentoring program. Absolutely loved it. Every Tuesday, I got the afternoon to mentor and tutor high school students. And I just found myself I found out things about myself that I really enjoyed working with youth. I saw myself in a lot of the students that I was working with, and just made a really huge connection. Eventually, I found myself tutoring and mentoring more than I was actually doing my real job. And I really had to like think about this, like, what does this mean? And
it
so
was a sign for sure.
Yeah, it surely was, because here's what happened. Fast forward, I was in that place in my life. It was like really a crossroad. I had to make a decision. I wasn't loving what I was doing. I knew I really liked being involved with students and youth. And I quit my job. And in my search of like figuring this out, my roommate's uncle just gave me a call like out of the blue. Hadn't talked to him probably about a good year or so. Just called me like out of the blue, and honestly just to like check in on me. And we started talking. I told him like where I was at, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" I was like, "Well, I'm unemployed, so nothing." So he's like, "Well, come on by to school. I'm just want to see, want you to see some things that we are doing, and just hang out, talk to a few students, just hang out. It's going to be a cool day." So I go there that day. I was only supposed to be there for like an hour and spent like the whole day there. And just high school, the way he led, the way the kid, gravitated to him, the energy that he had, like in the culture he had developed in that school, was something like totally different than my high school experience. And I knew right then, like, I wanted to be a part of that some way, like somehow. So the very next day I called him back, was like, "Hey, I don't have a teaching license, but I want to do this. Like, what should I do?" He said, "I'll give you a call back in like about 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, he called me back and said, "Hey, I need you to go down to the Department of Education, talk to this person. We're going to get you set up to be a substitute teacher." And pretty much the rest was history.
Wow. It's these moments when you hear about people who were so incredibly transformative in helping you figure out your future path, that it gives you like faith in humanity, or at least it gives me Absolutely. Faith in humanity. Are you still in touch with your roommate's uncle? Yeah.
I talk to him every once in a while. He has obviously moved from the school, but like still in education for sure.
That's incredible. So yeah. Thanks to that person, now you're on the other side of the coin, not in the classroom necessarily, but making sure that the best possible teachers are in the classroom. So in your mind, what makes a great teacher? Did you have one that had another transformative impact on you through your tenure in school?
I did. And I'm glad you asked that question, because she's kind of like the bar, and I guess like the scale in which I look at to find like awesome teachers. So believe it or not, my 10th grade French teacher, Mrs. Coleman, had a profound impact on me. She was, just like the epitome of like elegance and grace, talking about a teacher that just like walked in a way and like supported students in a way that was like truly like empathetic and like understanding like what their backgrounds are, what their needs were. And like she was really ambitious, to the point it became infectious. That ambition became infectious in her classroom, where you wanted to do more and be more because of the way like she carried herself. And so all of that, and she led a college tour program every single year, where she took about like 100 of us, I think it was 50 or 100 of us, to different historically Black colleges in the South. And so we did this every single year of my 9th through 12th grade years, and during spring break. So I tell folks all the time, I attributed that experience to her, because the first time I ever stepped foot on a college campus was because of her. The thought about going to college was honestly because of her. And so like those experiences really gave me the confidence and the will to go to college, finish, and here I am today.
Well, Mrs. Coleman also deserves a hearty thanks for what sounds like being an absolutely incredible, inspiring teacher for not just you, but hundreds and probably thousands of other children where you grew up. That's, when we think about great teachers and we think about, the crisis of educator shortages today, it's even more of a challenge to support teachers so they can be their best selves, so they can be the Mrs. Colemans in this really difficult, challenging environment. And being a teacher recruiter means that you sometimes have to be able to recognize that talent, that personality, that fortitude before it's fully realized.
Yeah, that's so important. I've been asked this question before, and I tell folks all the time. I think being in the classroom and like having spent some time in education before I decided to find great teachers definitely helped. I don't necessarily think you need to be a teacher, but I think you have to understand a couple of things. One, what is the landscape of education right now, and what teachers are facing? Like, I think it's important to be able to speak to talk the talk, right, and really understand like what teachers are going through and like what they are faced with. I challenge folks all the time with the question that you asked me, also like thinking about that, because we all have one, right? Who was that one teacher? And some of us are lucky enough that there's more than one, but who is that one teacher that inspired you the most? I think thinking about those qualities and those type of teachers is what you look for as a teacher recruiter, right? Like, and I think also too, like I knew like what I was really good at understanding the backgrounds of my students and really able to like build relationships. So I think about like those things that like made me successful in the classroom, or even like impacted my students. Those are the type of things like when I'm at a career fair, or like I'm on a phone, those are the type of things that I'm trying to like assess for. And sometimes you can automatically like pick up on it, but sometimes you kind of have to like dig deep, because sometimes there's many times I could tell you when I've talked to folks that had not even thought about teaching as a career field, and today they're in classrooms. And so just being able to recognize like the teacher inside them, I think is important.
Now, this is obviously a gift of yours. I think anyone who knows you would attest to that fact. And you also have put in the time. I promised I wouldn't age you on the podcast here today. But you've been doing all types of recruitment for some time now. And so what would you say, given the current landscape of education and your experience in recruitment, is most important, right, as a characteristic for a teacher recruiter?
I think where we're at now, like I think you have to have a hunter's mentality. What do I mean by that? Is because one, teacher recruitment is highly competitive. Like all schools are looking for great talent, and so like we're all after the same talent. And so you have to really be able to look for a diamond in the rough and a needle in the haystack, like many times, but also understand and be creative about where you're looking at. And so always is having your antennas up for opportunities of like who may make a great teacher, or like what event should I go to where there may be teachers or folks that have the qualities that could develop into a really great teacher. I think besides those, also, honestly, like I think the root at my success as a teacher recruiter is just the ability to build really great relationships. If I recruited you into a teaching role to be a tutor or a teaching residency, whether you started those opportunities right after our conversation or a year or two later, it really didn't matter to me. It really mattered to me that we first had rapport and like we built a strong relationship, because eventually folks will come around. Like obviously, like I want folks to like get in the classroom like as soon as possible, but I'm also cognizant of like right now may not be the right time for everyone, but I don't think like you should ever give up on a candidate, a lead, or a prospect that is showing teacher quality. So I think like I've been like really creative and like strategic about the way I follow up, outreach that happens, and just really continue like build and nurturing that relationship to really build a really strong teacher network and pipeline.
Yeah, Secretary Cardona spoke at Bank Street College a few weeks ago and said that Americans shouldn't be surprised by the teacher shortage. So let's touch on the big elephant in the room for a second. There are estimates that 80% of teachers are feeling burnt out right now, that 50% of teachers are considering leaving the workforce in a matter of days. And actually, I believe some schools have started already for the 2022-23 school year.
Yeah.
Schools are really going to be hitting the wall with their teacher recruitment efforts as kids return to the classroom. So, first of all, as a teacher recruiter, how are you feeling about this?
I mean, I think he's right. Like, I think that we've known that there's been a teacher shortage for quite some time, and continue to face some of the same dilemmas. So like, it's not a surprise. One of the things that makes me feel good about the work that I do and the team that I do it with is that we've been able to see an increase in the number of teachers that we've been able to bring here to iTutor over the past year, right? I think also too, a lot of school districts and a lot of programs are beginning to be more strategic in the way they develop models that's going to be more supportive to teachers as well as like new teachers. So like I continue to like find a lot of joy in reading about like how school districts and programs are looking to be just more supportive and like what the incentives looks like, because honestly, the teacher pay is an issue, right? But I don't think like it's just that. Like you sent me an article earlier today that I thought was outstanding about what they're doing in Arizona around their teacher shortage and really getting down to the nitty gritty of the root of the problem. And it's around the workforce structure of like how they're bringing teachers in, how they're supporting them, and looking at longevity to make sure we're retaining the right type of talent to decrease the deficit of teachers. So I think like it's a lot of that thought work that has to go into place and come to fruition. And I'm seeing that a lot with a lot of districts, and a lot of leaders are recognizing that and looking to partner to help find like better resources to support greater teacher pipelines.
There is a superintendent in Texas of this county called Ector County. His name is Scott Murray, and he is someone that, for our listeners, if you're not following the work he's doing in Texas, I highly recommend you look it up. But they're increasing pay. They have programs to support teacher pipelines and talent. They are doing this mentorship that you're speaking about, Marnee, because you're right. It's not just about each isolated item. It's not just about finding the good teacher. It's not just about paying them a competitive salary or a living wage, right? In some places, it's folks are barely making ends meet. And we can have a whole separate conversation about the way that teachers have to support their income because they're not making enough. But I think it's many of the pieces you're naming together. It's like a comprehensive environment we have to look at.
No, I totally agree. I don't think it's just like one thing. I think it's a collective effort, not only as us as like teacher recruiters, leaders in education, but also like the community as well. Like I think it's all these things that I think they can shape and change the narrative about why we need good teachers and why folks should become teachers.
So let's talk a little bit now about teachers of color. We know in our country, there's a ton of research around students of color seeing people that look like them in front of classrooms.
Absolutely.
We know the impact on the social emotional well-being of our students, the academic success of our students. How, if you were to evaluate as a whole our country's ability to build a pipeline and recruit teachers of color, how would you say we're doing? Yeah,
here's what I'll say. I believe that we continue to take the right steps forward to make progress. However, I know that there's still a ton of work that has to be done. And we know the stats, only about 20% of all educators in the U.S. identify as people of color. And that's compared to more than half of the students, right? And so there's many great programs. I do want to emphasize that there's many great programs at the collegiate level, at the nonprofit level that are solely focused like on this work. I think of organizations like Call Me Mr., Latinos for Education, just to name a few, that are doing amazing work to help this issue. I think we're focused on just the recruitment efforts, kind of like what I was saying before, rather than some of the root cause. Like understand 100% like there needs to be some type of investment there. Understand 100% that we could do a lot better at marketing and getting folks encouraged and excited about teaching earlier. But what I think one of the real things that would impact and change this narrative is about the quality of education that we're providing with our students. The reason why I say that, I remember, and I always like to tell the story. A few years ago, I was involved at a conference to talk just about this, and one of the students that I think was like a junior or senior at the time raised his hand and asked a really impactful question that I always carry in the back of my mind. He asked, why would I go back into a traumatic situation that I made it out of? And I had to really, really like think about that, because it kind of rocked me to my core. We are asking underserved students to go back into situations that were not, let's just be honest, that were not great for them K through 12, right? And I think until we really like recognize that and figure out ways to change the narrative around what education is, what teaching like really is, I think we'll do a better job at attracting the diversity that we want to see inside the school. So I think it's twofold. I think it's about us elevating the service and the quality of education, and then also making the right investment to promote teaching as a viable way to make an income, a great way to leave impact on your community, and also just doing a better job of like highlighting the joys of education. Yes, teaching is like extremely hard. 100% probably the hardest profession out there. But I tell you what, you talk to teachers that have been doing this for a while and like really enjoy doing this. I'm sure I know that there's some stories that they can tell you where if it wasn't for the joy that they found and the impact on their students, that they wouldn't be here. So I think more stories like that just have to be told.
That's really profound. What I love about your answer to this question is that you are identifying root causes and not just looking at quick fixes, which with any problem you try to solve, quick fixes aren't going to have longevity. So there's you're obviously demonstrating a true understanding of how we could reform education and teaching so that we can attract the types of teachers that we know have the greatest impact for students that are very deserving.
Absolutely.
I leave every conversation with you feeling better about the state of the world. And I hope that folks that are listening feel that way too, because, this is, especially today, after the past 2.5 years of pure crisis in our schools, that is not over, and it's crisis on top of crisis in many cases. We are talking about the future of our world, the future of our society. As trite as it sounds, our students are our future. So if we're not investing the top, most brilliant talent who care deeply about youth in our classrooms, we really have our eye on the wrong thing right now.
Agreed, 100%.
So Marnee, can you tell us all a little bit about what it has been like building out a teacher recruitment department at iTutor?
Yeah, I can talk about this all day. It's been the hardest, amazing, challenging, rewarding, fun experience probably of my career so far. So just having to be honest, like just having the autonomy to find really great people and really build something with awesome and talented people. I hope everyone in their career gets an opportunity to be able to do so. I think I've grown a lot as a leader over the last year in probably ways, I'll go ahead and say like probably ways I would have not if I would not have been here with iTutor and like afforded this opportunity. I get a chance to work with some brilliant people every day who really push forward the status quo of like what it means to recruit great teachers. Every day I wake up to Slack messages, text messages about ideas of what we could be doing better. Like what would it take to implement this? And so, working with folks with that level of dedication is like extremely rewarding and like fulfilling, and I would say like keeps me on my toes to be a really great and supportive leader.
Love a little shine in their direction. Love a lot of shine in your journey here developing that team. How has the work and the effort that you all have invested really transformed what teacher recruitment is at iTutor? Can you give a little evolution too of this topic of high volume recruitment and how your team is achieving that?
Yeah. And so again, like started out with a team of 2 and really kind of just looked at where the goals of the organization were last year and like how we needed to deliver the best and brightest teachers. I think quickly we thought of like, thinking about like high volume, and like we don't need like one or two, we need like 100 or two, but within like a couple months. And like really first is like thinking about how do we get this opportunity out into the right networks, into the atmosphere, because it's an awesome opportunity for educators to earn supplemental income. It's an awesome time for educators to be teaching virtually as well. And so like we really just wanted to get it out, get our opportunities out as quickly as possible. And so that kind of led me to hire and like build a team that included a marketing engagement specialist on our team. And so I found a person that was like just awesome, like really a strong marketing background that really talked us through and brought great ideas in the way that we leverage social media, the way we leverage email outreach, as well as the different conferences, events, and things like that we should appear at. One of the things I think like what helped us a lot also is like we really just like stepped outside the box, and like we weren't confined in like traditional recruitment methods. Like we wanted to praise our educators, one, whether they were interested or not, because we all have found joy in the profession of education in some type of way. And so like we really thought about the way that we could deliver high caliber events that would attract folks, whether they were interested or not. Like we would love for, an educator to go back into the school the very next day and talk about a virtual event that they went to that, and the organization that was hiring at a pretty lucrative hourly rate as a supplemental opportunity. I think like we started doing these and testing these things out in like last September, and really kind of found our stride by like early November, and kind of continued on in that path throughout the course of the last school year, as well as developing and also hiring four other individuals with specific focuses in their recruitment efforts. And so we brought on board someone that was really versed in like analytics, that really paid attention to and gave advisement on like where our performance was and like where we needed to like tweak. We brought someone on that had a lot of experience at like hiring folks and like developing and putting on events as well. And then also we brought on someone that had experiences with like building and like managing processes. And so everyone had like a really specific focus with the shared work in the recruitment function. So it kind of worked out for us. We were able to go to last August. September, I actually would be a better number. Last September, we may have onboarded like 50 folks. By the time we got around to like January, February, we were looking at somewhere around 100. And so we scaled up like pretty fast and like have remained like pretty consistent at that level throughout.
I'm not going to lie. When I first took on supportive recruitment, before we hired you, Marnee, to join the company, before we even knew Marnee was in the world, I literally Googled what is high volume recruitment? How do you do the thing? And then thankfully Marnee came and told us and showed us and found a great team to do the thing. And I believe one of your recent numbers was around 150 teachers joining in one of the 4-week spans that we had as well. So like averaging around 100, and prior, it had fluctuated as well. So just pretty impressed with, and these are your words, not mine. So forgive me for kind of,
no, you're fine.
The grit and hustle of those folks. Mm-hmm. I know you're really proud of them. I know you're really proud of everything that y'all have committed and the outcomes you've had. What would you say are some of the other qualities, now that I just stole 2 of yours, that describe your team?
Definitely those at the forefront, but just the level of like dedication and the attitude of like never settling, and like good is not enough. As you mentioned it at the beginning, like this is not for the faint of heart. And so like to see folks like ride this very rocky ride for the past year, just like speaks to like their level of like dedication. And then on top of that, their need to like figure out better ways for us to perform, figure out better resources that we can help support our educators with. And so that just in itself is like inspiring to me. And I mean, it's really cool to see in action, and it makes the work fun, even though it is difficult.
So not entirely changing gears, but on a related note, iTutor hangs its hat on contracting and employing state certified teachers. But that's all about to change. So can you share with the world why it is that iTutor and the iTutor recruitment team is now going to be recruiting tutors in addition to state certified teachers?
I can, and I'm excited about this, to be honest. I think it does a couple things. One, it allows us to be competitive in the ed tech and tutoring market in that space. And then, obviously, like, it allows us to provide more impact to students in schools. But what really excites me beyond that is now this provides an opportunity in somewhat of like a stepping stone opportunity for folks that have been thinking about getting into education. And it really creates if you think about it, like a pathway into teaching, right? And so, like, now that we have like opened up the opportunity for folks that may not have a teaching certification, but have been educators in different spaces, right? Maybe they have been like mentors like me and just volunteering, doing like homework help and things like that. Maybe they have worked at like daycare centers and like have a lot of engagement with students. Maybe they're a college student that is thinking about education and tutors on campus, right? And so, like, we identify educators in many different spaces and like platforms, and like, I'm really excited that now we're going to be able to like use that talent to expand our reach in schools all across the nation. And so I'm looking forward to seeing like how this level of recruitment translate into folks like going and getting that certification, becoming state certified educators, and maybe they teach with iTutor, but maybe they actually go into like brick and mortars to like impact students as well. Like, I just think like there's a lot of possibility with like what we're doing and how we support tutors in our pipeline.
So Marnee, it makes me think about your roommate's uncle.
Exactly.
Who found you and cultivated this passion that you didn't even realize you had burning inside of you to teach and eventually support teachers. So it's like a payback moment a little bit here.
A little bit, right? A little bit.
Yeah. A little bit. Does this college roommate's uncle have like a nickname or name where we could just shout them out and tell them?
John Stevens. John Stevens.
Look at this. Look at what your impact has been on now the work that's happening here at iTutor to allow folks that don't have that degree yet.
Exactly.
Help kids. Incredible. So, Marnee, a closing question for you. You've told us a lot about teacher recruitment, your journey in education, what you think are some of the characteristics that are most vital to recruiting teachers and what matters most for teachers and recruiting teachers of color. Curious for you, what advice you would give someone who is starting out in teacher recruiting today?
Yeah, for sure. 3 things. Number 1, you absolutely have to understand your why and your purpose in wanting to dive into this career, right? For a couple reasons. 1, you will, I guarantee that you will have a lot of naysayers and folks that will not believe in the state of education right now, that do not believe in teachers right now. And you're going to have to be a really, really strong advocate to combat that and be able to share your why. And I think like if you don't lean into that, like things like that can become discouraging and could you won't see the success that I'm sure folks are looking to have as they're becoming a teacher recruiter. And so I think the biggest reward is like really understanding and like being strong in like your why and your purpose and knowing that and being able to like speak to that as you are trying to convert someone that you see some teaching abilities into becoming a teacher and folks that are considering teaching as well. Again, like I talked about it earlier, like teacher recruitment right now is like highly, highly, highly competitive. And so I think you need to be creative and thinking about like, how do you set yourself apart from like other recruiters? Because that is the way that you're going to attract talent as well as like build those relationships I was talking about. I think like the third thing is always be thinking about what does this opportunity set you up for next? Because I think that is the thing that will continually give you that motivation to be excellent at recruiting, being creative in in your approach and being able to just develop into like what you want to do next. Maybe that's like leading a recruitment team. Maybe that's going into other like nonprofit work. I've seen folks like use a recruiting role as a platform and have advanced into like executive director position. So like the sky's the limit. I think like being really clear and understanding like those three things is what I believe will help you be successful as a teacher recruiter.
There are so many pieces of wisdom you have shared here on the podcast today that now the world gets to hear. Marnee, thank you so much for being a guest on the Learning Can't Wait podcast.
No, thank you for having me. Excited to talk a little bit about my journey. I hope it's impactful and will help someone else. I definitely just love what I'm doing, but most of all, who I'm doing it with. And so this is definitely a great opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.
Marnee, a pleasure. The pleasure is all mine, I should say.
Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@itutor.com.
This episode has been brought to you by iTutor.com, your online solution for sourcing highly qualified educators. Join districts all around the nation that use iTutor to connect with thousands of licensed educators who fulfill both core and supplemental instructional needs. Choose iTutor.com. Online education when learning can't wait. Now back to this episode.